Naomi Sinclair didn't expect to be humiliated in broad daylight. She wasn't loud, she wasn't lost, she didn't ask for anything free. She walked into Luxbell, Fifth Avenue's gleaming temple of luxury skincare wearing a soft pink blouse, tailored dark jeans, and Italian leather flats. Her hair was pinned neatly in a low bun, and her face carried only the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. She had reviewed the new collection online, studied the ingredients, and planned to buy the full set over $20,000 worth of skincare products for herself and the charity gala she was hosting that evening. But inside the store, no one greeted her. 3 white women entered after her. Each was welcomed warmly, escorted to private consultation rooms, offered champagne. Naomi? She was ignored. And when she finally reached for a product to examine it, the store manager appeared, his smile tight and eyes cold. "These items cost more than people like you make in a year," he said. "We don't do tutorials or free samples for browsers. You're not here to buy." Moments later, security arrived. 2 men grabbed her by the arms and dragged her out the door as shoppers looked on, some whispering, others recording. Naomi didn't cry. She didn't argue. She stood on the sidewalk, fixed her pink blouse, took a breath, and made one call. "Julian," she said, speaking to her husband. It happened again. The man on the other end wasn't just her partner. He was one of the most powerful tech billionaires in the country. And by morning, he would become the majority owner of Luxbell's parent company. Because Naomi Sinclair wasn't just a customer, she was the wake-up call. And what began as one woman being judged for her pink blouse and brown skin was about to become a reckoning the luxury world would never forget. Julian Cross stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, watching the city breathe beneath him. He had just wrapped up a virtual board meeting with investors in Tokyo, his voice as calm and calculated as always. But when his phone buzzed and Naomi's name lit up the screen, something shifted. He answered on the first ring. "It happened again," Naomi said. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the weight behind the words like glass holding back water. "Where are you?" he asked instantly. "Outside Luxbell. They dragged me out, Julian. Said I didn't belong." She paused. "Because of how I looked." Again. Julian's hand clenched the edge of the marble countertop. The words played on repeat in his mind. "Because of how I looked." "Did they touch you?" he asked, his voice low. "They did," Naomi admitted, softer now. 2 security guards, in front of everyone. "I didn't resist, I just walked out." Julian's silence said more than fury ever could. In the background, Naomi heard the clicking of keys, the quiet rustle of paper, the voice of his assistant somewhere nearby. Julian Cross wasn't just a husband. He was a man who built empires from scratch, who turned startups into revolutions. And now, someone had made the mistake of disrespecting the only woman he'd ever called home. "I don't want revenge," Naomi continued, "but this can't go unanswered. This can't keep happening to women who look like me who aren't married to billionaires." Julian breathed out slowly. "It won't. I need to handle this my way," Naomi said, her voice regaining clarity. "But I want you to know, so we move together." He smiled faintly, even through the storm rising behind his eyes. "Then we move together." By the time Naomi hung up, Julian had already sent a message to Marcus, his top legal strategist. "I need everything on Luxbell's parent company. Financials, structure, vulnerabilities. Quietly. Tonight." Naomi didn't see herself as a victim. She never had. But as she walked away from Luxbell's golden glass doors, her soft pink blouse catching the late morning light, she wasn't just a woman humiliated. She was a woman preparing to rewrite the rules. Before Naomi Sinclair was a name whispered at galas or featured in Forbes, she was just a little girl from the east side of Detroit raised in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat that smelled like soap and steam. Her mother, Lizette, was a Haitian immigrant who cleaned hotel rooms during the day and braided hair in the kitchen at night. Her father, Gerald, worked the night shift as a bus driver and spent Sundays fixing up old radios, his fingers always stained with grease. Naomi learned early what silence sounded like when the power was out, or when the refrigerator held more air than food. But she also learned pride. In every polished floor her mother cleaned, in every smile her father forced through exhaustion, in every time they reminded her, "You are not less." At school, she was the quiet one who always finished her assignments first, who never forgot her library card, who corrected the teacher politely when they mispronounced Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. In high school, a community mentor named Marisol Vega changed her life. Marisol ran a small beauty salon 3 blocks from Naomi's apartment. But it wasn't just hair and nails, it was refuge. It was conversation. It was education. She introduced Naomi to clean skincare, taught her about ingredients, and let her work part-time mixing homemade shea butter masks and vitamin serums. Shea butter and science, Marisol would say with a wink. That's your magic. Naomi didn't just fall in love with beauty, she fell in love with empowerment through care. With a full ride to Columbia and later an MBA from Wharton, Naomi rose fast. But she never wore the climb like a badge. She wore it like armor, quiet, polished, and always with purpose. She met Julian at a philanthropy roundtable. Everyone else in the room fawned over his status. Naomi, lost in her notes and stats, barely looked up. He noticed that. He noticed her. Their romance was private. Their marriage, even more so. Naomi kept her name, her rhythm, her identity. Now, standing under the shadow of Luxbell's golden facade, the pink of her blouse catching sunlight like a flag, Naomi wasn't thinking of revenge. She was thinking of Marisol, of her mother's calloused hands, of the teenage version of herself who once got followed around a store for holding a designer lotion. She had money now. She had power. But what she'd always had was intention. And that was more dangerous than anything Luxbell could see coming. Eva Chen had worked at Luxbell's Fifth Avenue store for 11 months, 4 days, and after today, maybe a few hours more. She stood near the rear fragrance counter, eyes locked on the security monitors above her register, watching the pink-bloused woman on the screen. Naomi. Graceful. Still. Completely out of place in a store that claimed to sell beauty, yet often failed to recognize it unless it came wrapped in the right skin. Eva had seen it happen before. Not always this obvious, but it was there. The subtle tension when a customer didn't look the part. The way Darren Locke, the manager, would suddenly appear when a black or brown woman entered the luxury skincare section. How his voice dropped when he asked, "Do you need help?" Meaning, "Do you belong here?" But this time it was different. This time, Naomi had said nothing offensive. She hadn't demanded attention. She had simply examined a serum with quiet focus until Darren approached her like she was a threat. "These items cost more than you make in a year." Eva had flinched at that line. She knew the prices. She also knew her paycheck. Darren wasn't wrong about the cost, but he was so deeply, disgustingly wrong about everything else. And when the security guards came, Eva froze. Her feet were cement. Her hands shook behind the counter. She wanted to say something to intervene, to ask Darren to pause, but her mouth wouldn't open. Now, hours later, the store buzzed with uneasy silence. The video had made its way into the employee group chat, spreading like wildfire. No one knew who had filmed it, probably a customer. But the footage was clear. Naomi being dragged out, Darren's words caught with chilling clarity. "She's just another social climber trying to get freebies." That sentence had already become infamous. Eva looked around the sales floor. No one was speaking about it out loud, but everyone felt it. Something was coming. A reckoning. A consequence none of them were prepared for. And though Eva hadn't said a word during the incident, guilt clung to her like the expensive perfume samples she handed out each day, faint but impossible to ignore. She checked her schedule. Tomorrow, she was off. But something told her she should come in anyway. Something was about to change. By the time the clip of Naomi's ejection reached 500,000 views on social media, Julian Cross was already 10 steps ahead. He didn't slam doors. He didn't raise his voice. He simply leaned back in his chair at Crosstech's Midtown headquarters and said, "Start digging." Marcus Bell, his chief legal strategist, didn't need clarification. He'd worked with Julian long enough to recognize the look in his eyes, that still, surgical kind of fury that made tech giants kneel and regulators sweat. Within the hour, Marcus had pulled a dossier. Luxbell was owned by Eminence Brands Group, a privately traded luxury conglomerate with high-end cosmetics, fashion, and wellness brands under its umbrella. On the surface, the company was clean, but dig a little deeper, and the cracks showed. "There's a pattern," Marcus said during their midnight briefing. Complaints from customers of color being ignored, lower conversion rates in diverse zip codes, HR files that show minority staff turnover twice the industry average. Julian nodded slowly. Systemic bias dressed in a designer suit. "We can get in through their weakest flank shareholder vulnerability," Marcus continued. "They took a financial hit last quarter. One of their key investors is pulling out next week. If we move before then, quietly, we can gain majority control of the board." Julian turned toward the massive screen on the wall where side-by-side images of Naomi appeared. One from the Gala website, radiant and commanding. The other, Grainy footage from outside Luxbell, her pink blouse caught in sunlight as she adjusted her posture. She didn't ask for a reaction, Julian said. She asked for a response. He paused. I'm going to give her both. By 3 a.m., the Crosstech had quietly funneled capital through 3 shell entities, acquiring over 61% of Eminence Brand's active shares. A 4th acquisition would seal control. Julian sent a final message before leaving the office. Prepare full transition protocols, and keep my name out of it until I walk through the door. As dawn cracked over Manhattan, Luxbell prepared to open like any other morning, but the man they'd unknowingly crossed, he was already their boss. And the empire they'd built on exclusion? It was now owned by the one woman they tried to keep out. At exactly 9:58 a.m., 2 minutes before Luxbell's doors were set to open, the first Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the curb in front of the Fifth Avenue storefront. It shimmered like obsidian under the morning sun, drawing glances from passers-by and murmurs from inside the store. From behind the sleek tinted window, Naomi stepped out. Gone was the soft pink blouse. Today, she wore an immaculate white pantsuit, tailored to perfection, every seam a declaration. Her natural curls were swept into a regal updo, and a single gold pin gleamed at her temple. She looked like sunlight itself, sharp, dignified, untouchable. From the second Rolls-Royce that pulled in behind, Julian emerged. He wore a dark charcoal suit, simple yet masterfully cut. His presence was quiet but commanding, like the moment before thunder. Behind them, a caravan of black SUVs rolled in. From them emerged 12 men and women in sleek business attire, lawyers, advisors, corporate strategists. No one smiled. This wasn't a photo op. Inside Luxbell, Darren Locke was mid-sip of his espresso when a junior associate burst into the back office. "Mr. Locke," she whispered urgently, "you need to see this." He walked toward the front windows and froze. The blood drained from his face. "That's her," he muttered. The same woman he had insulted, dismissed, and tossed into the street less than 24 hours earlier. Only now, she wasn't alone. She was flanked by power. Darren adjusted his tie, slapped on a smile, and strode toward the front, desperate to reclaim control. "Places, everyone," he barked at the staff. "They're just here to shop." The doors opened at 10 o'clock sharp. Naomi entered first. Every heel click on the marble floor echoed louder than any voice. Behind her came Julian, and then the wave of executives fanning out like chess pieces across the showroom. Darren stepped forward, hand outstretched. "Welcome back to Luxbell," he said, voice tight. "We're honored to have you." Naomi didn't take his hand. Julian spoke instead. "I believe you met my wife yesterday," he said, voice smooth but heavy with meaning. Darren's fake smile faltered. He blinked rapidly, trying to process the shift. I didn't realize." "You didn't care to realize," Naomi said quietly. Then Julian handed him a sleek folder embossed with the Crosstech insignia. "Effective 4:30 a.m., he said, "we own Luxbell." And just like that, everything Darren thought he controlled vanished without a single raised voice. The store lights dimmed slightly as the last customer was gently turned away and the glass doors of Luxbell locked from the inside. Confused employees stood frozen on the showroom floor, unsure whether they were witnessing a publicity stunt or the end of their careers. "Everyone to the center," one of Julian's team members instructed, firm but respectful. Slowly, the staff gathered into a semicircle beneath the towering chandelier, now more interrogation light than ornament. Darren Locke stood stiff at the front, still gripping the unopened folder in his hands like a lifeline he didn't dare read. Julian stepped forward, calm as ever. "Let's be clear," he began. "What's happening today isn't about one bad incident. It's about a pattern, a culture." He turned to Naomi, who now joined him at the front. With quiet authority, she said, "What happened to me yesterday wasn't an isolated mistake. It was the result of learned behavior, tolerated bias, and an environment where appearance is valued over respect." Julian gestured to one of his assistants, who tapped a tablet. A large portable screen blinked to life behind them. Security footage played, Naomi entering the day before, being ignored, then confronted. Darren's words echoed across the room. "These items cost more than you make in a year." Gasps, shifting feet, faces turned pale. Then came graphs charts showing customer demographics, complaint ratios, and employee turnover. In store after store, the same pattern emerged. People of color were ignored more, served less, and made to feel like outsiders. One employee, Eva, lowered her head. She remembered freezing, saying nothing. Shame flushed through her chest. Julian's voice remained even. This brand was built on exclusivity, but exclusion isn't luxury. It's failure dressed in marble and gold. He turned to Darren. You led that failure. You're fired. Effective immediately. Darren opened his mouth, but no words came. A security team member stepped forward, waiting. He dropped the folder and walked toward the exit, stripped of power without a single raised voice. Naomi looked out at the staff, some frightened, others relieved. Many of you followed orders. Some of you stayed silent, but silence in moments like these speaks volumes. She took a breath. Starting today, Luxbell is closed. Every store, nationwide. Gasps rippled again. But it's not the end, Naomi continued. It's the beginning of something better. 3 weeks later, the towering glass facade of the former Luxbell store was still there, but the energy had shifted entirely. Gone were the velvet ropes, the cold stares, the feeling that you needed to prove your worth to step inside. In their place stood a new logo in brushed gold, Legacy. Below it, in elegant lettering, was a single line. Luxury isn't about exclusion, it's about elevation. Inside, the transformation was even more profound. The marble floors remained, but the harsh white lighting had been softened. The display counters were lowered to feel more welcoming, the shelves reorganized for easier access. For the first time, every product carried a visible price tag. No guessing, no games, and no assumptions. Naomi stood in the middle of the space, watching as the finishing touches were placed before the soft opening. She wore no makeup today, just a touch of balm and moisturizer, her natural curls loose around her shoulders. She didn't need armor. Legacy was the armor now. Behind her, Julian reviewed final onboarding materials with the HR leads. A new team had been assembled, diverse in age, background, skin tone, and language. Each wore a name tag not only with their first name but also the languages they spoke. It was a subtle but powerful shift, connection over status. Legacy's training room, once reserved for product briefings, had become a space for something more meaningful. Unconscious bias workshops, cultural awareness modules, and empathy-based client service training. Eva, the junior associate who had stayed silent that day, was now part of the new pilot mentorship program Naomi had designed. She was learning not just sales, but purpose-driven service. We're not here to shame the past, Naomi said during her first team meeting, standing where Darren once held court. We're here to rebuild it smarter, kinder, and stronger. The Legacy brand would launch with a new designer initiative upstairs, offering shelf space and business support to indie formulators from underrepresented communities. The first 10 participants had already been chosen, and Naomi would mentor them herself. Julian, watching her from the mezzanine, smiled not just out of pride, but awe. Naomi hadn't just risen above humiliation. She had turned it into fuel. Legacy wasn't a rebrand. It was a revolution dressed in soft tones and radical intent, and it was only getting started. The line stretched halfway down Fifth Avenue. It was the soft launch of Legacy, but word had already spread like perfume in a warm room, slow, sweet, and impossible to ignore. Press cameras hovered at a respectful distance. Influencers snapped curated content from behind velvet dividers, and stylists whispered excitedly about Naomi Sinclair's new empire. But Naomi wasn't in the spotlight. She was on the floor, just like everyone else. No entourage, no special title badge, just her in a pale lavender blouse, soft linen pants, and comfortable flats moving quietly through the store, observing, adjusting, occasionally offering a smile. That's when she saw her. Near the skincare wall stood a young woman, barely out of college by the look of it. Her backpack was slightly scuffed, her jeans carefully patched. She wore a plain navy tee, and her dark curly hair was pulled into a practical puff. She looked like she was trying not to take up space. She hovered near the Eden Botanica Serum, a $220 bottle, newly featured in Legacy's curated Skin and Soul section. She reached out, then pulled her hand back. Then again. Naomi stepped beside her. That one's my favorite, she said casually. Brightens, hydrates, doesn't clog. It changed my skin. The girl turned, surprised. It looks amazing. I'm not sure if it's in my budget, she admitted, then paused. I'm studying chemistry. I want to create my own formulas someday. I just like reading ingredients. Naomi smiled, recognizing the hunger, the curiosity, the quiet dream. What's your name? Lena, the girl said softly. Naomi walked to the register, picked up a small sample set, and handed it to her. "Try this. Come back next week and tell me what you think. Oh, and take this." She slipped a folded brochure into Lena's hand. The Legacy New Formulators Program. Are you a dreamer, creator, innovator? Let's build something together. Lena blinked. Wait, this is... You're Naomi Sinclair, aren't you? Naomi simply smiled. I used to be a girl standing in front of a serum shelf wondering if I belonged here. You do. As Lena left, holding the sample like a precious stone, Naomi turned back to the crowd. It wasn't just about skincare. It was about what happened when someone saw you before the world decided your worth. And Legacy was built for exactly that. 6 months later, Legacy was no longer just a new name in luxury retail, it was a movement. Across 50 locations nationwide, the transformation was complete. Gone were the silent stares, the coded dismissals, the velvet-wrapped elitism. In their place stood open doors, open minds, and a new generation of staff trained not just in product knowledge, but in empathy, cultural intelligence, and connection. Inside the flagship Fifth Avenue location, the daily rhythm of commerce flowed calm, confident, and inclusive. Naomi stood on the mezzanine overlooking the main floor, arms crossed, a soft smile on her lips. She watched a middle-aged Latina mother sampling foundation with her teenage daughter. A trans woman was being guided through a skincare consultation by a staff member fluent in sign language. A Muslim woman chatted in Arabic with a Moroccan beauty advisor about clean makeup formulas. This, Naomi thought, is what luxury should have always looked like. Julian joined her, coffee in hand. Quarterlies are in, he said, nudging her gently. Legacy's outperformed Luxbell by 34%. You turned their failure into the future. Naomi glanced down at the floor, where Lena, the young woman she'd met during launch week, was now wearing a Legacy blazer, proudly assisting a customer. She turned it into the future, Naomi said quietly. All of them did. We just opened the door. Behind them, in the Legacy training studio, another group of new hires was completing their final module. At the front of the room, the phrase, "Luxury is how we make people feel," glowed softly on the screen. Naomi stepped in to lead the closing reflection, a tradition she had started on day one. True luxury isn't what we sell, she told them. It's the experience we create, the confidence we nurture, the humanity we restore. That's our legacy. She paused, letting the silence hold. Each day, you get to help someone shine. Some will walk in uncertain, guarded, maybe even invisible. Don't look through them. Look at them. That's how we change the world, one moment of dignity at a time. Outside, the sun hit the gold Legacy signage just right, casting its reflection into the glass doors. It no longer read as a name, it read as a promise. And the story that began with rejection had ended with revolution. Life lesson. Dignity is a right, not a privilege. The story of Naomi Sinclair reminds us that no matter how far we rise in life, how successful we become, prejudice can still greet us at the door. But her quiet strength teaches something deeper. True power lies not in retaliation, but in how we choose to respond. For older generations who have seen both progress and pain, this story is a reflection and a call to action. It urges us to remember that dignity is not earned through appearance, wealth, or titles. It is inherent. And when we witness injustice, even subtle, quiet injustice, silence can become complicity. Legacy wasn't just a store. It became a symbol of how compassion, awareness, and responsibility can reshape broken systems. Whether in our homes, communities, or workplaces, we each carry the ability to make others feel seen, valued, and respected. Because the way we treat people, especially those we think hold no power, is the truest reflection of who we are. And it's never too late to choose better. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one.